Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining today's discussion on food safety and emergency preparedness. As a reminder, today's event will also be streaming on Facebook Live. My name is Ryan Woolley, and I'm the Director of Public Education here at the American Kidney Fund. Today's event is very timely, as not only is September National Food Safety Education Month, but the information shared today is particularly relevant for those affected by the ongoing emergencies due to Hurricanes Fiona and Hurricane Ian. I do want to note that the American Kidney Fund has activated its disaster relief program to provide emergency grants to dialysis and post-transplant patients impacted by Hurricane Fiona in Puerto Rico. And we'll share a link in the chat to our page of resources specifically for people with kidney disease who are affected. And during today's presentation, we'll provide information in general about AKF's disaster relief program and where to go for additional resources. In addition, you'll learn about food safety and how to prepare ahead of time to ensure you have safe food during an emergency. People with kidney disease or kidney transplant have a higher risk for foodborne illness. And when you experience an emergency, like severe weather that causes power outages and floods, the safety of your food could be in danger. So in today's webinar, you can learn how to be prepared and take steps to stay healthy in the event of a disaster. And before I introduce you to our guest for today, I want to go over a few housekeeping items. This event is being live streamed on Zoom and Facebook. And if you're watching live, we encourage you to join the conversation. So go ahead and let us know you're here in the comments section and type any questions you have in the Q&A feature on Zoom or on the comments on Facebook. We'll try to get to as many questions as we can during our Q&A section. And at the end of this webinar, we will include a link to a brief satisfaction survey in the chat. You can also see this link if you're on Zoom by clicking continue on the page in your browser after the webinar ends to get to the survey. We kindly ask that you take a few minutes to complete it. Your honest feedback will help us continue to make our programs the best they can be. And finally, if you're a health professional and believe that your accrediting body may provide you with credit for attending this webinar, you can email us at education@kidneyfund.org. While this webinar is not accredited, we'll be happy to send you a certificate of attendance for today's session. Also, please note that this webinar is being recorded and we'll have the recording available to you afterwards. All right, so without further ado, I'd like to introduce our speakers. First, I'm excited to be joined by Margaret Solar. Margaret is the Director of Patient Support here at American Kidney Fund. She has over 20 years of experience in managing complex and comprehensive programs in healthcare. As AKF's Director of Support for the past 5 years, she's managed AKF's $350 million patient assistance program with our grant review team and call center. She has expert skills as a liaison in conflict resolution and mentoring teams to deliver exceptional results. Margaret, I'll give you a chance to go ahead and say hello.
Hi, everybody. I'm glad to be joining you, Ryan and Meredith, and everybody else who's on the webinar today. Thanks for attending. Happy to be here talking about AKF's patient assistance program, specifically disaster relief, which, as Ryan said, is very timely with the Hurricane Fiona in Puerto Rico, as well as Hurricane Ian, which is hitting Florida, which I haven't even had a chance to tell Ryan. We just actually turned that on about 30 minutes ago. So we're also helping with Hurricane Ian right now as well. So I'll be sharing information about our disaster relief programs, some general emergency preparedness, and also share some information about some of the partners we work with during disasters who work in the kidney space, who have some excellent resources as well on their websites and through their organizations. So thank you.
Great, thank you, Margaret. And I'm also excited to welcome Meredith Carothers. Meredith is the Technical Information Specialist at the United States Department of Agriculture. And she works in food safety education and promotes safe food handling and positive behavior change through creative national campaigns and outreach programs. She also directly assists the public by answering consumer food safety inquiries on USDA's Meat and Poultry Hotline. Meredith received her master's in public health from George Mason University with a concentration in community health promotion, and is passionate about sharing food safety information to keep consumers safe from foodborne illness. Meredith, I'll give you a chance to say hello as well.
Hi, everyone. As Ryan just introduced, I'm Meredith Carothers. I work with U.S. Department of Agriculture's Food Safety and Inspection Service. We've had a great partnership for the past few years with American Kidney Fund, and I'm really happy to be here today to talk to you more about how to remain food safe during severe weather, power outages, floods, which again is very timely given some of the weather things that are happening right now. So very much appreciate being able to be here, and I really hope everyone can learn something about food safety today.
Great, thank you, Meredith, and thank you both for joining us today. So we'll get started with our presentation about emergency preparedness, and then we'll pass it off to Meredith to speak about food safety. And remember, at the end of our time today, we have a Q&A to answer any questions you may have. All right, Margaret, go ahead and take it away.
Thank you. As I said, I'm going to talk a little bit about our disaster relief programs, as well as some emergency preparedness, and try to share some other useful information. So our disaster relief program, it's been in existence, and it's advancing on me. Our disaster relief program has been in existence for 15 years. It has distributed as much as $750,000 in assistance in a single year. It helps patients impacted by natural disasters, and we can help with food replacement, home repair, if people need to relocate for temporary lodging, or even transportation. So it really can help people when they're often on the move and often very quickly have to relocate. A lot of times our disasters takes a few weeks to kind of play out with flooding. So we're always watching, not just the first few days, but we keep in touch with local case or coalition, the Kidney Community Emergency Response, who are sort of the boots on the ground, and to know what is going on and how we can keep our program going, and what the needs are really for patients. So it's not just the first day, we really are involved in contact with people several days in, and we keep watching. So last year, in 2021, we did help with a Hurricane Ida. There was a decent amount, 766 patients who were impacted, almost 152,000 were distributed to help patients. There was also the Texas winter storm, which was a very unusual event for Texas, and helped quite a few, almost double the amount of people and the amount of assistance there as well. This year, as when we were making the slides, we helped with the New Mexico wildfires, and there were only a couple of people who had reached out to us, but we were happy to help. We also got involved recently with Kentucky flooding. We had that program where we helped patients who were impacted. And then now in the last couple of weeks, unfortunately, Puerto Rico experiencing another hurricane. So far, it's been 14 patients, 14 grants that have been issued. And as I said, about a half hour or hour ago, we turned on disaster relief for Hurricane Ian hitting Florida and impacting patients there. So we're always quick to react and respond to any needs that come up. And we sort of have a plan in place all the time where we know what we need to do to quickly get a program up and running. My advanced arrows, there we go. So how to get a disaster relief grant? Well, you can reach out to us in several different ways. You can visit kidneyfund.org, our website, which has been completely revamped as of last year. So we're excited about that. There's a lot of information for patient assistance as well as educational information. But you can reach out through there. There's a link for GMS, which is our grants management system. That's where you could register and create a profile with all your demographic information and see what programs you would be available for. And then once you know what you're available for, then you could apply for grants. We have live phone coverage Monday through Thursday. And we also have scheduled phone appointments through gmsassist.com, where you could pick a time, a 30-minute appointment where you can set aside some time and we'll call you at a time that's convenient for you. We also have an email for registration issues. If people who have trouble maybe getting into their account in the database, so that's a registration email as well. We also have messaging. Once you're in GMS and you're a user, we have a whole messaging system within the database that we communicate with patients, caregivers, and renal professionals. Also in GMS, there's a resource section, or like an information section, where we have any of the latest information we want to share with you, whether it's FAQs or anything to make using the website easier. And for every disaster, we do develop a resource guide with our staff for whatever area that's impacted. And we quickly get a resource guide up in GMS. We get it on the AKF website as well as a resource. So here's an example of something you might find, or you would find actually, on AKF's website and on other websites like this. It's a great tip sheet on preparing for a natural disaster. The first thing you really want to do is create a plan. You always want to have a good comprehensive plan in place. And the plan is going to vary for different people, different patients. And whether you're a patient or a caregiver or maybe a professional, but you want to have your written plan. You want to, if you know a big storm's coming, as a dialysis patient, you might want to go and get dialyzed and then talk to your clinician, your dietitian on what you need to do and get prepared. A lot of people will prepare and get a 3-day diet so that they can minimize fluids and waste until they can safely get dialysis again. You can make a disaster prep kit with all your supplies you need for in case of emergency. You can, if you're a home dialyzer, you have other issues, so you can also talk to your physician about that as well. Some people talk to local utility companies about the needs they have for their home in that case. Be your own advocate. Maybe you need to wear a medical alert bracelet or carry a card in your wallet with your emergency contact so someone can get to the right person. Always stock up, have an emergency first aid kit. Make sure the medications or your disaster prep kit, make sure everything is not expired, everything is still good. It's a good idea to check it every 6 months and stay prepared. It's also good to look at local resources or national resources. I'll talk a little bit more about that. When a disaster is looming, so to speak, we reach out to some different organizations. And one of them is HSAG, the Health Services Advisory Group. They are what's kind of known as the home of the ESRD network. The ESRD network, if you looked at a map, the United States and its territories are sort of divvied up, and there's different networks that are involved, again, with sort of boots on the ground with ESRD patients, their families, and providers. And they're always trying to increase the quality of care and make sure that the voice of the patient and what the needs of the patient are being expressed, and they're really trying to kind of stay connected. The ESRD networks work under the direction of CMS, Centers of Medicare and Medicaid, and they all kind of work together for the needs of dialysis patients. Another organization we reach out to is KCER, Kidney Community Emergency Response, and sometimes ESRD NCC Center. They're, again, part of the networks. They have different people who work for them, and everyone is kind of rallying for the good of the patient. I actually had been in contact sending emails on Sunday night in anticipation of the storm in Florida, just trying to get the emails out to say, hey, let us know what you're hearing so we can know if our assistance is needed for a grant program. So their websites are fabulous as well. Lots of great information, like an emergency planning checklist. There are a lot of downloadable templates, great things you can fill out, as well as like the patient emergency contact list. Kind of, it reminded me of a lot of us maybe grew up with, there's always an emergency list next to the phone in the kitchen often, or maybe on the side of the refrigerator, where you had something, maybe sometimes it was like a whiteboard you could fill out. Well, it's not a bad idea to have a checklist. Makes you think of things you might have kind of forgotten, or have that emergency contact list somewhere where other people could find it in your home as well in case of emergency. But a lot of great templates on our website, other websites that I'm mentioning. There's a lot of guides like preparing for an emergency for people on dialysis. I know they're going to put the links here for you, so to help you out to find some of these things. But boy, these our website and the other websites, they're wonderful. Lots of great things you can download for help. Again, the 3-day diet, not a replacement for dialysis, but it helps in an emergency situation. Certainly it'll help a patient until they can get to the dialysis that they need. There's also emergency disconnect procedures for people, for in-center dialysis patients. There's a lot of resources in Spanish as well. So please make sure you check out our website as well as these wonderful partners. There's so much great information. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Margaret. And Asia from American Kidney Fund has been dropping some of those great resources that Margaret mentioned in the chat so that you can go and access them. And now I'll pass it over to Meredith.
Hi, okay, thank you so much. Let me make sure it's clicking. Okay, great. So as we mentioned in the introduction, my name is Meredith Carothers and I work for USDA's Food Safety and Inspection Service. So I wanted to give a quick introduction about what the Food Safety and Inspection Service is. Food Safety and Inspection Service, FSIS, is responsible for ensuring that the nation's meat, poultry, and egg products are safe and that they are properly labeled and packaged. So that's what we do from a big regulatory perspective, but from a consumer education perspective, we also spend time and resources to educate consumers on foodborne illness and how to safely handle food. So why foodborne illness? Foodborne illness is a preventable public health challenge that causes about 48 million illnesses, 128,000 hospitalizations, and 3,000 deaths each year in the United States. Foodborne illness is an illness that comes from eating food that is contaminated or contains foodborne illness causing bacteria. Some of the most common pathogens and bacteria that can be found in meat and poultry products include E. coli, Listeria, Salmonella, and Campylobacter. I'm sure many of us have heard of at least one of those. The onset of symptoms of foodborne illness may occur within weeks and often present themselves as flu-like symptoms. And the person who's ill may experience symptoms such as nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, or fever. Because the symptoms are often flu-like and can be kind of mild, many people may not recognize that the illness is actually caused by a harmful bacteria or other pathogens in food. Everyone is at risk for getting a foodborne illness. And like I mentioned, some of the symptoms can just be as simple as passing, a tummy ache or something at home by yourself. But there are people that are at greater risk for experiencing a more serious illness or even death should they get a foodborne illness. So everyone's at risk for foodborne illness. It can be as simple and mild as something you can pass at home. Even for people who are not at risk, it can be something that causes hospitalization or causes things worse. But especially those that are at risk, those people who are at risk are at that greater risk for a serious illness from foodborne illness. So those at greater risk do include infants, young children, pregnant women and their unborn babies, older adults, or people with weakened immune systems, such as those with kidney disease or transplant recipients. Why are emergencies risky for food? Why are we talking about this? What can be, really taken into consideration when it comes to emergencies? So we do practice basic safe food handling in our daily lives, which is fantastic and what we recommend for everybody. But obtaining and storing food safely does become more challenging during severe weather and emergencies like a power outage or natural disasters such as hurricanes and floods. Severe high or low outside temperatures or other severe weather can cause power outages, which create a temperature risk for foods, and floods and fires can introduce bacteria and other contaminants to your foods and food products. For certain perishable foods to stay safe, they must be stored at a temperature of 40 degrees or below. Otherwise, foodborne illness bacteria can multiply to dangerous levels. If foods go above that 40-degree temperature range, they do become at risk for that severe bacterial growth, and it can essentially make them unsafe, or it could lead to very severe illness later on down the road. And during power outages, food can enter what we call the danger zone, which is a range of temperatures above 40 degrees, but between 40 degrees and 140 degrees, where bacteria really like to multiply rapidly. So that's essentially why power outages are risky for food. They create an unsafe temperature environment for foods. Floods and fires create an environment where foods can be exposed to different bacteria and other contaminants, which is something that can make your food risky as well. So preparing for a power outage. Preparing for a power outage or severe weather emergency can help keep your food safe and help it last through the power outage. So sometimes a power outage can be, shorter. You have, a few hours or maybe one day. Those are going to be the type of power outages where you're more likely to be able to maybe save your food if you take care to, make sure that it stays safe. Of course, if we're talking about a hurricane or a severe disaster where power can be out for multiple days, sometimes even a week, the preparation tips and really what to do to save your food may not be as feasible, but sometimes still good to know the information so you can try your best to save what you can. But being realistic, sometimes power outages last longer than we can really keep food safe for, so keeping that in mind. But in a shorter power outage, here are some things that you can do to prepare to attempt to save your food. So we do recommend putting appliance thermometers in your refrigerator and freezer. This will help make sure that your refrigerator and freezer are set at proper and safe temperatures prior to the power outage. And you can also use them to kind of gauge what temperature level your fridge and freezer are at during a power outage or after. We'll get to that a little bit more later, but in general, your refrigerator should be set to 40 degrees or below, and your freezer should be set at 0 degrees or below. As you're starting to find out you might have some weather coming, or you know that a power outage might be happening because of a severe thunderstorm or something, you want to take some of your foods and start to group them together in the refrigerator or freezer. This igloo effect will help the food stay colder longer because it's kind of, the coldness is keeping each other, it's close to each other. It's going to help keep those items cold more, as opposed to if they were spread throughout the refrigerator or freezer. You can also consider freezing refrigerated items that you don't need right away. So if you have leftovers, milk, any raw meat or poultry that you know you're not going to need in the next few days, you can pop those into the freezer because the freezer will keep a safe temperature for longer than the refrigerator. So that's an option too, to help try and keep things safer. You can freeze jugs or bottles of water, bags, fill it with water, freeze those for ice, and or use frozen gel packs to ultimately have extra cold sources or to plop around your fridge and freezer. Those will help keep, create cold air in those environments, help keep things colder for longer. If you have one, and if it's possible, have a cooler available to be able to put foods into there with some ice or cold sources to help keep those foods cold in a cooler versus in the refrigerator once it's no longer at a safe temperature. Also recommend to find out where dry ice and block ice can be purchased, again, if it's feasible. If there's an extended power outage, 50 pounds of dry ice or block ice will help keep a fully stocked 18 cubic foot freezer cold for 2 days. So it's a great option to have for a lengthy power outage if it's something that's easily accessible or able to be accessed. It can also help keep any other medications and things like that cold too. You can also then store non-perishable foods on higher shelves if you know a flood is coming. So those other tips have been great for power outages, but if you have an idea that a flood might be coming, like a hurricane, storing food on higher shelves is going to help keep them, higher up in case there is flooding. That'll make sure that they're staying away from flood waters. Of course, we can only do so much, depends on how much the flood is, but it'll help reduce the risk that they're, on lower shelves, easier access to flood water. And then also keep a few days worth of ready to eat foods. Again, sometimes we can save our foods in the refrigerator. Sometimes we just won't be able to. So keeping foods that are ready to eat or that you don't have to use refrigeration to keep safe are also going to be great options and great way to prepare ahead. During a power outage, sometimes we can't plan ahead for a power outage. Sometimes they just pop up. But so during a power outage, you want to make sure that you're keeping your refrigerator and freezer doors closed as long and as much as possible to help keep that cold air inside the refrigerator and freezer. Again, the cold air is really going to be what's going to keep your food safe. Eventually, that refrigerator and freezer will, not continue to keep that cold air and they will be unsafe, but keeping the door closed will help keep it for longer. You want to have your appliance thermometer in the refrigerator and freezer as a tool, but also, as we just said, you want to keep the doors closed as much as possible. So using that appliance thermometer more as a reference, maybe after the power outage, or if you are unsure if the power is going on and off and on and off, using it to check it then. But if you have a prolonged power outage, consider keeping those doors closed and not checking that appliance thermometer too frequently, just to make sure you're keeping that cold air in. During a full-on power outage, a refrigerator will keep a safe temperature for up to 4 hours. So that's not necessarily a super long time. So, for a shorter power outage, 4 hours should be plenty of time. Hopefully the issue gets resolved, the power comes back. But if it's a prolonged power outage, your refrigerator will only keep a safe temperature for 4 hours. For a freezer, if your freezer is half full, it's going to keep a safe temperature for 24 hours. And if it is full, it can keep a safe temperature for 48 hours. So about 1 or 2 days. Food in the front, in the door, or in small thin packages will thaw faster than large thick items or stuff in the bottom back of the freezer. Again, this is where pushing those items together, keeping them closer together will help keep them colder and frozen for longer. But those smaller items or items near the door are going to thaw faster. If the power is out for a long period of time and you're, for example, the refrigerator, you're coming up on that 4-hour time frame, you can transfer your foods to a cooler with ice. That will actively help continue to keep them cold. It'll keep your items safe and you will be keeping them at a safe temperature. You do want to then pay attention to the ice and when it starts to melt so you can replenish the ice as needed. But either way, it will help keep the food cold enough to maintain safety. If you've reached that 4-hour time frame, the food in the fridge is no longer going to keep a safe temperature and you've not entered into that realm of being risky safety-wise. And especially if you have kidney disease or a transplant recipient, someone else in your family that you're caring for is or has, you know, any of those conditions, you want to keep that in mind that it's especially essential to not give them any foods that could potentially be risky. So then ultimately too, another option for helping to reduce the number of times that you're opening your refrigerator door is if you feel like it's going to be a prolonged power outage, you know, but you don't want to quite move everything into big coolers just yet, you can take some of the frequently used items and put that in the cooler. So that way you can keep the refrigerator door closed for as long as you can, but that way you still have your essential items that you need on hand, still being kept cold with ice. And if the power is out during a snowstorm, I know it's really tempting to be able to use the snow as a cold source, but we don't recommend placing perishable food outside in the snow because outside temperatures can vary and food can be exposed to any unsanitary conditions or animals outside. But you can use snow, put it in plastic baggies, and then use that as a cold source. So that's another option too. So after a power outage, the first thing you're going to want to do after the power outage is assess how long it has been and what you have done with your food. So if your power has been out for a safe amount of time, meaning say your power has only been out for 2 hours and you kept the fridge door closed that entire time, everything should be fine. You can just resume business as usual. Your refrigerator should kick back in and start to make sure that all that food is getting nice and cold fully again, and it'll be great. But say your power has been out for 10 hours. You haven't been able to move things to a cooler, or maybe you had to evacuate because of a storm and you've been gone for days and you're coming back to a prolonged power outage. The first thing you're going to have to do is assess your refrigerator. So you want to go through your refrigerator and pull out foods that aren't safe anymore. So those are all going to include raw meat or poultry, soft cheeses, any dairy such as milk, yogurt, eggs, any cut or sliced fruits and vegetables, any dough, cooked pasta, leftovers, opened baby anything, so baby formula, baby food, all of that is going to need to be discarded and would not be considered safe. Some of the items that would be considered safe would be hard cheeses, certain condiments like jelly, ketchup, mustard, any whole fruits or vegetables, most baked goods, any non-opened juices, peanut butter would be safe. All of those items would be safe and you can just go ahead and continue to use those. But if it has been a prolonged power outage, you need to consider what would not be safe anymore and go through your refrigerator to make sure you've cleared your refrigerator of those items. Because remember, a refrigerator will only hold a safe temperature for 4 hours. A freezer, if half full, will hold a safe temperature for 24 hours, and then a freezer, if full, will hold for 48 hours. Same thing for the freezer. If it's been more than that safe time frame and food is either thawed, feels warm, no longer has ice crystals, you'll want to go through and discard those items too. Certain items you can keep, like if you froze bread, that can probably keep and be no problem, but frozen vegetables, any frozen leftovers, meat and poultry, that all is going to have to be discarded as well. And just overall, when assessing situations when it comes to food safety, we recommend to never taste food to determine its safety, because the thing about foodborne illness causing bacteria is that you can't actually taste, smell, or see it. So you would have no way of knowing if something is actually safe or not. That could make you sick. So definitely wouldn't recommend doing that to taste food. As I just mentioned, some of the foods that are unsafe versus safe after a power outage are going to be your things like raw or cooked leftover meat, poultry, fish, eggs and egg substitutes, luncheon meats, hot dogs, casseroles, cut or cooked fruits and vegetables, milk, cream, yogurt, sour cream, or any salad such as chicken salad, tuna salad, macaroni salad, etc. All of those would be considered unsafe. Safe are going to be things like your high acid foods, mustard, ketchup, relish, any whole fruits or vegetables, unopened juices, hard processed cheeses, butter, or baked goods such as breads, muffins, cakes. If you have a cream cheese frosting or a cream filling, that would not be considered safe. Otherwise, for your freezer, you have safe options that include foods that have partially thawed but still contain ice crystals, foods that have remained at that refrigerator temperature. So again, this is where an appliance thermometer could come in handy. Say you had a power outage for 15 hours, you know, your refrigerator items are not safe, but you look inside your freezer and your freezer thermometer says that the temperature inside the freezer is 35 degrees Fahrenheit. That's fantastic because it's below 40 degrees, which is a safe temperature to keep those foods at. Even if items have thawed in that temperature range, as long as it's below 40, those items are still safe. You can go ahead and refreeze them. Quality might suffer a little bit. And of course, if there's things like ice cream, that's probably not going to refreeze well anyways. So you might want to consider discarding those, but other items would be perfectly safe to go ahead and refreeze. If that temperature is above 40 degrees Fahrenheit, things are warm, there are no ice crystals, regardless, you want to go ahead and discard those. So now that we've talked about power outages, we'll go ahead and talk a little bit about food safety after a flood. So if there's any possibility before flooding, like we mentioned, raise your food up to a higher shelf, possibly raise your refrigerator and freezer off the floor as well. You want to move canned goods and other foods that are kept in low places to a higher area. If you have been a victim to a flood or experienced flooding, use bottled drinking water that has not come into contact with flood water at all. If you have bottled water that has come in contact with flood water, screw caps are not considered flood water resistant, so or safe to prevent bacteria from getting in and whatnot, or cleanable. So you will not be able to drink those bottled water. So drink bottled water that does not come into contact with flood water. Also, do not eat any food that has come into contact with flood water, and discard any food not in a waterproof container, especially cardboard juices, cardboard milk or baby formula boxes that have come in contact with flood water. You also, unfortunately, would have to discard any wooden cutting boards, plastic utensils, baby bottle nipples, and pacifiers. Those, unfortunately, cannot be salvaged, cleaned, and sanitized, so we would recommend not to use them. Metal pans, ceramic dishes, utensils, countertops, those can all, pots and pans and things, those can all be properly cleaned and sanitized by either submerging them in boiling water for 2 minutes or sanitizing them with 1 tablespoon of bleach to 1 gallon of water. And any undamaged all metal cans can also be salvaged, as well as retort packages. But anything that does not seem like it would be a waterproof container is going to need to be discarded. So I know I've thrown a lot of information out there. We do have a lot of different resources specific to food safety and severe weather, power outages, floods. I didn't go over fires as much, but we do have resources for fires as well on our FSIS website at www.fsis.usda.gov. We have a whole little emergencies section that has these different fact sheets for you for a resource. And we also do have our meat and poultry hotline with live food safety experts like myself available to answer any questions about food safety, severe weather. If you've experienced a power outage and need help going through your refrigerator or freezer, we can help with that as well. So we do have our hotline available there. And that is
Thank you, Meredith.
Food safety portion.
Yes, thank you so much. Lots of information to keep in mind, and all very important and timely too. All right, so now we'll open it up to our Q&A. And if you still have any questions, please go ahead and throw them in the Q&A section of Zoom. We'll try to get to as many as we can. There were some submitted during registration as well. So to start us off, Meredith, first question for you: how do you freeze produce appropriately to make it last longer?
Yeah, so anytime you are freezing items, the thing that's going to help them preserve their quality the best is going to be airtight. So any kind of wrapping or container that you can put them in to remain airtight is ultimately going to help remain or keep that quality for that product. When it comes to fruits and vegetables, freezing ultimately is going to, shift the water content in those foods. So you may not always be able to freeze strawberries and then take it out of the freezer and it be the exact same as it was when you froze it. So just keeping that in mind too. But again, keeping it airtight will definitely help.
Great, thank you. And a question for you, Margaret. If I'm looking for emergency assistance from the American Kidney Fund, where should I go?
So you can go to the American Kidney Fund, kidneyfund.org website. There is a patient assistance, patient support area. There is a link to GMS, the online database, and there you can register and create a profile and see what you are qualified for. And then based on what you're qualified for, you could enter a grant.
Got it, thank you. And back to you, Meredith, for this next one. If leftovers look a little questionable, should I just heat and try a bite to see if they're still good?
So definitely not. You, like I mentioned, never want to taste food to determine its safety. If you have any reservations or concerns about food, we always say when in doubt, throw it out. And again, because people living with kidney disease or any transplant recipients are considered an at-risk population that could get more sick from foodborne illness, it's just always best not to try it. And also, if food has been out in the danger zone for too long, bacteria can reach certain levels where they produce heat-resistant toxins and then can't be killed by reheating or cooking. So always just best to steer clear from that if you're not sure about it. And it won't always be a guarantee that by reheating it, you'll make it safe. So again, just always better to remain cautious and be safe.
Yeah, I like that. When in doubt, throw it out. I think that's a good thing to remember. Another question for you here. You mentioned discarding canned foods in glass jars. If there was a flood, why would you, the question is, why would you discard them?
So sometimes home canned foods could have an issue, or not an issue per se, but may not have a solid seal. If you're concerned about not being able to clean and sanitize it properly, screw caps just always aren't considered the most watertight or safe. I know that home canning and doing that seal makes them shelf stable, but it may not necessarily keep any of the bacteria and contaminants from getting in. So it's not our expertise per se for home canning. So it's definitely something I can double check on and follow up. But anything with a screw cap, usually we recommend not to use after a flood. So it's, again, just kind of on that realm of being more cautious and careful. But it's definitely something I can look further into. We just don't have as much home canning information, but I can look into that to confirm.
Okay, thank you. Another question for you, Meredith. Is it safe to cook with well water, especially during a flood?
So I'm actually looking on our resource website right now to double check. I know that I've seen information about cooking with well water. I think there's something, especially after a flood, especially if your well water could be contaminated, you'll want to consider how to make your well water safe. So boiling it potentially before you do anything with it. Just to be super, super safe after a flood. A lot of times your county will provide information on that as well. Like you'll have a boil water advisory or something like that. So just pay attention to that too. If you have gotten an all clear from the county to use your water and it is safe, then yes, by all means, continue moving forward. But always good to check with your county too if you have well water and the potential contamination for that.
Great, thank you. And there were a few questions about where to go for kidney-friendly recipes and different ideas for what types of food would be considered kidney-friendly. So I'll just answer this one here. So we have a resource called Kidney Kitchen, and someone on my team can drop that link in the chat as well. But Kidney Kitchen has several different recipes and different guides for you that are all been reviewed by dietitians, renal dietitians, and it has a wealth of information to make sure that you're eating that you can eat a kidney-friendly meals and fluids as well. So I definitely recommend checking out that source. All right, another one for you, Meredith. How many days are leftovers good? Because I know you mentioned about the food in, during a disaster and how long it can stay good, but I guess in general, leftovers, is there any, criteria for how long that should last?
Yes, so we definitely recommend using or freezing your leftovers within 3 to 4 days. This will help make sure that if there are any bacteria present, then you're able to get control of that and eat your leftovers before they're potentially going to start to spoil or become unsafe. So 3 to 4 days, I love leftovers, and I oftentimes have to freeze my leftovers because I can't eat them within that 3 or 4 day time frame. So freezing is a great option if you're not able to finish those leftovers within that 3 to 4 day time frame, but 3 to 4 days.
Great. And how do I know if the food I cooked is safe to eat?
So one of the things that we definitely recommend for this type of question, and just for cooking at home in general, is to have a food thermometer and to use your food thermometer to test if your food if it's reached a safe internal temperature. If everything's been handled properly up until then, you've made sure that you've washed your hands, you haven't cross-contaminated, you've fully cooked it and refrigerated it, all of it should be safe to eat. And especially using a food thermometer is essential for anyone at risk and anybody at home. We always recommend using a food thermometer to make sure it's reached that safe internal temperature, so all of your bacteria has been killed. We actually do offer free food thermometers as a resource. You can contact the Meat and Poultry Hotline to get one. It's one per household, but we do offer those as a free resource for people because we want to make sure households have a free food or have a food thermometer to use it. And so again, we have that as a free resource. Please feel free to contact us for one if you don't already have one, but it's probably the best thing you can have in your kitchen to make sure that your food is remaining safe.
Great, thank you. And I'll do one more question and then we'll go into our wrap-up slide at the end here. So the last one, again for you, Meredith, is, see where it is. What's the easiest way to prevent cross-contamination in food?
So it's interesting because one of the things that actually helps prevent cross-contamination is our first step to food safety, which is washing your hands. You really washing your hands and making sure that you're paying attention to where your hands are going in between touching different things is going to help prevent cross-contamination or reduce cross-contamination. So if you are touching raw meat and poultry, before you touch anything else, you want to make sure you're washing your hands fully, before you grab a spice container. Or you then can, if you've grabbed something or touched something with raw poultry juices or something on your hands, you then want to make sure that you're cleaning and sanitizing that after. If you don't, the risk is that then you would continue touching things and move bacteria all around your kitchen. And that's definitely not, or it could cause you to get sick because it'll cause it to touch something else and then you'll eat that. That could lead to foodborne illness. So washing your hands, paying attention to where things are being, touched or moved and whatnot after handling certain foods. And then, one of the biggest things too is you could also do something like use 2 different cutting boards. And then that way your raw meat and poultry is staying nicely over here away from your raw foods or your foods that are considered ready to eat, or your vegetables and things like that. So keeping things separate in your kitchen, washing your hands, all of that is a great way to reduce cross-contamination.
Awesome, thank you. And I know most of the information you shared today was about, thinking about during an emergency state and how to avoid foodborne illness. And I know that the USDA also has plenty of resources too about just in general avoiding foodborne illness, like some of these questions toward the end. Is there somewhere that you recommend people go to for just in general? Would it be the hotline, or are there any other websites that people can go to?
Yeah, so if you have general questions about safe food handling, I do see a few in the chat, we may not be able to get to today, but contact our Meat and Poultry Hotline and they're definitely able to help you out. Like it was mentioned in my intro, I used to answer questions on the Meat and Poultry Hotline. They still step in and do every once in a while, but my colleagues there are fantastic. They know their stuff. They're able to help you out with any of your generic, food safety for consumers in the home type questions. And we also, in addition to our emergency resources, have a bunch of different just safe food handling resources in general on our FSIS website. And then we also do partner with our other federal agencies that do food safety, FDA and CDC. And we have a website called foodsafety.gov. So there's great information on there too. as it relates to safe food handling in your home and also severe weather and power outages.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. All right, and just to wrap up before this webinar today, we reached out to both of our speakers here to get a little bit of a recap, 2 things to know and 2 things to do. We know we shared a whole packed hour of information during today's discussion, so we wanted to make sure we took some key highlights for you and made sure that you walk away with some of this key information and a plan of action. So with that, Meredith, could you go through the 2 things that you would like people to know?
Yes, so 2 things, if you're going to take anything away from the presentation today, 2 things we want you to know is that in a power outage, a refrigerator keeps a safe temperature for 4 hours, a freezer keeps a safe temperature for 24 hours if half full, and 48 hours if full. You know, hopefully people don't experience prolonged power outages, but if you do, this is definitely life-saving information to know that your food is either safe or not in your refrigerator and freezer. And if you are anticipating a power outage, having this knowledge as well helps you know kind of how to best prepare for one and what to do. So definitely keeping those in mind. And then again, I know we didn't go over fires too much in our presentation, but floods and fires can expose food to contaminants and bacteria and should be taken seriously if you are victim to or experience one of those. So keeping in mind that your food can be contaminated by floods and fires.
Great, thank you. And then I'll pass the next off to Margaret. Could you let our listeners know the 2 things that they should do?
Sure. Again, number 1, create an emergency plan in prior to an upcoming disaster or an emergency. Have a plan, have it spelled out, write important numbers down. Again, the old whiteboard on the side of a refrigerator or near the phone or something like that, or having it somewhere accessible. And of course, make a disaster prep kit and an emergency first aid kit, and check it every 6 months. Make sure it's well stocked, that everything is there that you need, that it hasn't expired. So review it and review it often.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much to both of our speakers for joining us today and sharing all this great information. To stay in the loop for any upcoming events, be sure to like the American Kidney Fund on Facebook and send us your email through kidneyfund.org. And lastly, please remember to complete the brief survey at the end of today's event. And a member of our team will drop that link in the chat for you here, or you can also find it on the browser of your webpage to follow the link and complete the survey there. And we appreciate your honest feedback. It really helps us improve the program and make sure that we're meeting your needs. And lastly, I'll just say that this webinar was recorded, so we'll be sending out the recording to everyone that registered and provided an email address. And I know we shared a lot of different links during today's talk, so we will make sure that that email that gets out to you has all of those links so that you can go back and refer to all of that great information that our speakers shared. And with that, I'll close it out. Thank you so much.